So in this video, we're going to take a look at the second spec point in the Bentham and Kant topic, which is to what extent are Bentham and Kant's ethical theories consistent with religious moral decision making? I'm going to be focusing in terms of religious moral decision making on Christianity. So looking at how compatible Bentham and Kant's theories are with Christianity and Christian moral decision making. So remember, Christian ethics and moral decision making stems from their beliefs about God. So Christianity teaches that there's only one God, so it's a monotheistic religion, of course. God is believed to be omnipotent, omniscient, the creator, the judge, and the lawgiver. Remember that there's also a lot of diversity in Christianity, so different Christians are guided by different theories and teachings when they're making moral decisions. There is no one Christian view. So some Protestant Christians follow divine command theory and believe that an action is only morally good if it's commanded by God. Roman Catholic morality is primarily based on natural moral law. And then other Christians, including Anglicans and Protestant churches, may base their morality on situation ethics. Of course, all Christians, when they're making moral decisions, might also be guided by the teaching and example of Jesus. So it's a really complex question, this, like how compatible Bentham and Kant's ethical theories are with religious moral decision making, primarily because there is no one way that Christians make moral decisions. So that kind of gives you a clue as to why this is quite a good topic that the examiners could set for a 15 marker, because there's going to be different perspectives on this. So let's take a look at Bentham. We're just going to, for the next few slides, have a really basic look at issues of consistency or compatibility, and then we'll go into things in a little bit more detail. So in terms of Bentham's approach, basic facts about Bentham's moral decision making are it's teleological, it's consequentialist, and we have the principle of utility, so the greatest good for the greatest number. Well, the teleological and consequentialist nature of Bentham's approach has obviously some consistency with Christian teleological approaches, namely situation ethics. Bentham's theory is also, because of its teleological and consequentialist nature, a much more flexible approach to ethics, and it can be argued that this is more consistent with Jesus and how Jesus himself lived. However, it's really important to note that Bentham's theory, because it's teleological and consequentialist, is not consistent with the more deontological approaches in Christianity, such as natural moral law and divine command. Now let's have a look at Kantian ethics, and we'll see the same kind of thing but in reverse. So of course Kant's ethic is deontological, it's absolutist, we have the principle of universalizability. So the deontological nature of Kantian ethics means that to some extent it would be consistent in its approach with Christian deontological theories such as natural moral law and divine command. But then this absolutist nature of Kantian ethics, of course, is going to conflict with Jesus' teaching that's much more flexible and situational in its focus. Remember, of course, Jesus famously said, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. And obviously this is also going to conflict with the more teleological theories of ethics in Christianity, such as situation ethics. So hopefully that's given you an overview of the way that this subtopic of the Bentham and Kant section of the spec sort of works. Let's now have a look in a bit more detail at Bentham and compare Bentham to Christian moral decision making. We've established that there's some compatibility and some incompatibility, so some consistency and some lack of consistency, just by the very nature of Bentham's ethic being teleological and consequentialist. So let's have a look at it in a bit more detail. So Bentham developed his theory as a non-religious approach. So it's really important to stress that, because what that means is that any compatibility or consistency with Christian moral decision making is going to be unintentional. Now, whereas Christianity often highlights the importance of considering the needs of others and is based around Jesus' teaching on agapeic love, so love your neighbour, love one another. Bentham's utilitarianism does not allow room for this. Its main core principle is the principle of utility, the greatest good for the greatest number. Whereas Jesus helped the weakest members of society and valued them, as shown in the way he reached out to those who'd been rejected, such as the lepers, Bentham's approach to moral decision making suggests that the weaker members of society can actually even be sacrificed if it's in the best interest of the majority, which seems to be fundamentally at odds with Jesus' teaching and Jesus' example. Now, whereas Bentham rejected the use of set rules for moral decision making, Christianity does place value on using rules. We see this in the use of natural moral law in Catholic Christianity, and also in the continuing use of the Ten Commandments and obedience to divine law from the Bible across all branches of Christianity to some extent. Bentham's approach to moral decision making is a consequentialist theory that does not consider the intention behind an action, whereas reflecting on motive is actually a really key feature of Christian ethical approaches as well. So Jesus said, "Beware of practicing your righteousness before other people in order to be seen by them, for then you will have no reward from your Father who is in heaven," which really suggests that motivation, the reason why we carry out actions, is of vital importance in Christianity. Let's have a look now at Kant and how Kantian ethics connects to Christian moral decision making. Again, remember that just in terms of its categorization, its nature as a deontological approach to ethics, there's going to be some compatibility and some incompatibility with other ethical views within Christianity. But let's have a look at some broad ideas too. So although he was a Protestant Christian, Kant tried to show that moral decision making should be rooted not in religion actually, but in reason. Kant's theory is absolute and deontological, which we know makes it consistent with divine command theory, which is also a non-naturalistic approach to ethics too. The difference is, though, that in divine command theory, right and wrong clearly stem from God, whereas for Kant, right and wrong stems from pure reason. Having said that, Kant's emphasis on reason as a tool for discerning duty does seem a little bit similar to the emphasis that Aquinas put on the use of reason when developing natural moral law as a Christian approach to ethics. Now, Kant's focus on objective moral rules is not consistent with situation ethics or with the flexible situational approach demonstrated by Jesus himself. Remember, he famously healed people on the Sabbath, and he would go out of his way to help those in need, even if it seemed to contravene kind of the laws of the day. Kant's duty is quite a cold theory based on duty rather than on love. Remember, even Aquinas would allow for exceptions to the secondary precepts in extenuating circumstances, but Kant does not. However, has to be said that Kant's principle of universalizability, that you should act only according to that maxim, whereby you can at the same time will that it should become a universal law, is compatible with Christian ideas about ethical behaviour and the golden rule taught by Jesus: do to others as you would have them do to you. So to pull all this together, here's an example of a 15 marker that you could get on this topic. Note that the question says the ethical theories of Bentham and Kant are not consistent with religious moral decision making. If you've studied Christianity for your kind of religion for A-level, then religious moral decision making literally just means Christianity. Okay, so Christian moral decision making, hence the focus in this video. What I've tried to do here is to write for you kind of a bit of an introduction, like a thesis statement that you could give at the start of your essay. I want you to see here how I've tried to kind of make a